Had no need to fight tonight.
What is going on, guys? Norg97 here, back again with another YouTube video, and today we are going to project the contracts of the remaining RFAs. Now, there's a little bit of RFAs in the NHL right now that are causing a lot of controversy. Whether you look at up north in Vancouver at Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes, or you go down to Buffalo where you look at Rasmus Dahlin, or you go over to Minnesota where you see Kirill Kaprizov, St. Louis, Robert Thomas, and there's a bunch of others. So, we're going to go through every single RFA, at least the big ones, and project their next contract. Now, the rules are you have to stay under the cap. Now, sure, you can make any LTIR moves you want. You can say, like, oh, you know, I know there's rumors out there of Quinn Hughes getting 8x8. That's not going to work with the Vancouver Canucks cap space. So I did it so I would fit in within the Canucks salary cap, so that way they wouldn't go over it. That was my rule. But anyways, before we get into the actual contract projections, if you're new to the channel and have not already subscribed, I really would appreciate it if you would do so. We are getting really close to 1,000. I really appreciate it if you threw me a sub, and I won't waste any more of your time. Let's get into the contract projections. But before we can get into the big name RFAs, we gotta look at some of the guys that are really just down below that aren't really too big of deals to worth cover their contracts. And those guys are Anatoly Galyshev from the New York Islanders, Keith Bellas from the New York Islanders, Nolan Patrick from the Vegas Golden Knights, and Zach Senyshyn from the Boston Bruins. If I am correct, that is all the RFAs that are not big names. So I'd say the biggest name out of all those is obviously Nolan Patrick. I even have his jersey. And I mean, these guys are probably going to get 1 year, $750K. Patrick might get 2 years, $1 million. These guys will get minor contracts if so. So, they're not really big deals to cover. Anyways, let's get into big names now. So the first guy that we're going to cover here is up north in Vancouver, Elias Pettersson. So Pettersson, he's an interesting one, honestly. And I mean, genuinely, you look at the contracts negotiation between him and Quinn Hughes, I've heard there's no angry side. I've also heard that it's not close. And, obviously, since training camp is this month and the season is less than a month away, that is obviously a problem. So you look at this and you say, okay, so what is their projected contract if you fit it under the cap? Now, the Canucks have $10.6 million in cap space, so you have some stuff to work with here. And his NHL totals over the past 3 seasons were 155 games played, 65 goals, 88 assists for 153 points. And as you can tell in the thing I'm about to show here, his projected contract will be 3 years, $6.5 million for me. Now look, I see the Canucks have $10.6 million. Pettersson is worth way more than $6.5 million, and especially 3 years. But I think with the way the Vancouver Canucks have cap space situated, I think they want to work on a bridge deal for him and maybe even Quinn Hughes as well. So then that way, when their contracts expire, they can sign him to a much bigger, much longer term, hopefully. So I think that's really the way they want to go with Pettersson and Hughes, to be honest, but we're not a Hughes yet, obviously. And I mean, yeah, Pettersson is a generational talent. He kind of had a down year this coming season, but, he would hit the post a lot. He had a big injury. He just wasn't, healthy in the lineup, but that doesn't mean he is a bad player. He's still very solid. He can definitely put up about 80 points a season, maybe even more at that point, and he's definitely one of the best players for the Vancouver Canucks. So it's obviously important to sign him to a bridge deal and then get a big term later on. Moving on here to our second player. Now, this guy is up in Minnesota, and it is Kirill Kaprizov, however you want to say it, whatever. Kaprizov, interesting. He was drafted in 2015 in the late rounds. Wasn't really looked at then, but then he really turned himself around in the KHL. He scored just an absolutely insane amount of goals, had great playmaking skills. He has the upset of a first liner, maybe even a captain at this point, to be honest. And I think he's really solid. Now, the difference between them and the Canucks is the Wild have a lot to work with. They have $12.2 million in cap space. So that's obviously way more than enough to sign him. He played 55 games played in his first season, had 27 goals, 24 assists for 51 points. As I said, a generational talent. He should be one of those players who really brings us Wild to the next step. And that's the one thing the Wild honestly need. And honestly, he won the Calder Trophy, well deserved. And I still think, nonetheless, he's a very solid rookie who has really good upside next season. Now, his contract for me, you'll see it on the screen right now, It is 8 years, $7.5 million. Now, this is what they probably want to work with. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they go 8 by 8. I really wouldn't be too surprised, but I thought I'd keep it to 7.5, so then that way, they have a little bit more, cap space to work with. Because I think 8 years is more likely, the most likely the outcome. I haven't seen anything below 8 years, and rightfully so. And I've seen 8 mil as the AAV, maybe even 9 mil for some reports. But I think they might go 7.5 mil. Maybe they go 8 mil. 8 by 8 wouldn't really surprise me, but I have them going by 7.5 mil because they do have a couple guys they need to sign next season, like Kevin Fiala, Kaapo Kakkonen, and they have a couple other guys that are up for grabs next season. So it is worth trying to keep some cap space available. But nonetheless, I still think that is a pretty rightful contract for Kaprizov. As for Pettersson as well, I have not heard anything much about him. I thought they were close on a deal a little bit ago, but then it's just gone dark since. So moving on here into our next player, we go over to the Ottawa Senators to look at forward Brady Tkachuk. Now, Brady Tkachuk is an interesting one for me because this is also a contract that isn't very close on a deal from what I've heard. So his NHL totals over the past 3 seasons were 198 games played, 60 goals, 65 assists for 125 points overall. That is very solid. Honestly, that's probably one of the best. That's some of the best deals we've seen. And honestly, I feel like he is a very solid forward, and I think he's going to be a big part of this Ottawa Senators future, along with Tim Stützle, Drake Batherson, Shane Pinto, a couple other guys on that roster as well. So you obviously want to lock him up. And the Senators have $24.5 million in cap space to do so. So it's obviously going to work out. I mean, I can't imagine they don't work out an 8 by 8 contract, as you can see on your screen right now. I can't imagine they don't, honestly. Maybe he wants 9 mil. Honestly, he might even deserve it, to be honest. But they have $24.5 million in cap space. I think they are fine. And I mean, sure, they have Stützle coming up. They're going to have Gustafsson coming up, of course. Pinto as well. They're gonna have issues with their players. They're gonna have guys to sign, but I still think that Tkachuk definitely gets 8 by 8, no doubt in my mind. Moving on into the next player here. This player could honestly be one of the most interesting guys, Robert Thomas of your St. Louis Blues. Now this is interesting because the Blues, unlike the Sabres, unlike the Canucks, unlike the Wild, unlike the Senators, the thing is with them is that they don't have cap space. That is St. Louis's biggest problem. They have $781,000 in cap space to sign Robert Thomas. So if I was going for projected contract here, looking at his totals, 169 games played, 22 goals, 65 assists for 87 points, he could be a solid middle six forward, not denying that at all. But if I was looking for a contract, honestly, it would be 1 year, $750K. And honestly, I think out of all these guys, Robert Thomas is the biggest offer sheet candidate. And if he gets offer sheeted by anyone, I've heard rumors of the Coyotes, I've heard rumors of Detroit, I've heard rumors of a couple other teams. But if the team offer sheets Robert Thomas, the Blues are screwed. The Blues are honestly screwed. Unless they make a big trade to get him back, they lose a solid young forward who, I mean, with the Arizona Coyotes, really would develop very well around that young prospect core that they're going to have in a couple years. So it could be possible, but my projected contract for them is a 1 year $750K because honestly, what else do you go with to fit under the cap? Do you go with like a 1 year $780K? Like, I'm not sure what you go with there to fit under the salary cap. So obviously, I had to go with league minimum. Although I highly doubt he gets league minimum. Highly doubt. He probably gets like 800, 925K, around in that remarks. But I feel like that, to fit under the cap, that's what you have to do. So there you go. Moving on now, we're going to travel up north from St. Louis over to the city of Buffalo and look at defenseman Rasmus Dahlin. Now, Dahlin's a very interesting one for me. The Sabres have a lot of options. They have $23.6 million in cap space, so they obviously have enough money in the entire universe to sign Dahlin. He's played 197 games played, has had 18 goals, 89 assists for 107 points. Now, Dahlin last season had a very down year for his standards, but who is good in Buffalo at this point? I mean, honestly, they traded away all their good guys. Their only good guy anymore is Eichel, and he hasn't even played. So, whatever. Anyways, so they have the options to sign him. They definitely have enough money in the entire universe to sign him. Now, the question is, what do they go for? And I think they go for this type of contract. 5 years, $4.5 million. It really wouldn't surprise me if they lock him up for 8 years, $8 million. But honestly, I'm not sure if he's really worth that. So they could probably go for a 5-year, $4.5 million contract, or maybe go for a 6x6. Definitely possible. You can really decide on that. It's really all up to you, honestly. But I think Dahlin could be a very solid defenseman, especially if Buffalo plays their cards right with Owen Power and a couple other defensemen coming up for them. This could get interesting. And finally, we started off the video of Canuck. We're going to end it with a Canuck. We look at defenseman Quinn Hughes. Now, Quinn Hughes is a very interesting one because he can't get offer sheeted. And that's why I feel like I ranked him less than Pettersson. Now, his totals over the past couple seasons was 129 games played, 11 goals, 86 assists for 97 points. Hughes is obviously a very solid defenseman, a very good offensive defenseman. He just had a very down year for his standards and just a crap show of a Canucks team. It's not even really his fault, in all honesty. But he is obviously not that good defensively, and that's why I have him going by a 4 years, $4 million contract. So a 4x4. And you may be saying, Nordic, that is absolutely ridiculous. Remember the rules. I got to fit it under the cap. And the Canucks have $10.6 million in cap space. And Pettersson, I'm paying him $6.5. I got to pay Quinn Hughes $4. I have to. I'm sorry. Like, I honestly, if he's not getting offer sheeted and, he's not as big of a deal as Pettersson is, I'm not saying that he's a bad player. But I feel like if we're going to make the rule that it has to be under the cap, obviously I'm going to make him less because I think Pettersson is honestly a higher level than Hughes. Although Hughes is a great defenseman, sure, but I would obviously rank him above other guys, but I think Pettersson is better in value. So obviously I'm going to rank him higher. Obviously this isn't going to be his contract. Obviously Robert Thomas is not going to get signed for league minimum. Obviously Dahlin's probably not going to get 5 years. Tkachuk probably will get 8 years. Kaprizov might get 8x8. But in all honesty, I don't know if, these contracts are made correct. And I obviously know that Quinn Hughes is not going to get 4 years, $4 million. He's going to get probably an 8x8. Now, anyways, that concludes our contract projections for all of the RFAs. Let me know what you guys think the guys' contracts are going to be down below in the comments. I'd like to thank you all for watching. If you could subscribe, I really would appreciate it. And I will see you guys in the next video. Adios.